Morgana has always been one of the Disney villains that was easier to sympathize with, especially after taking her full backstory into account. Everything Morgana did during her career as a villain seemed to be driven by her need to avenge her older sister Ursula's tragic life and death, but it turns out that her real reasoning was actually the exact opposite. What Morgana really wanted was to shine in the eyes of her mother because she knew that she was not the favorite sibling. And after rewatching The Little Mermaid 2, it's starting to become clear why Ursula was her mother's favorite. Be forewarned, the reasoning is truly horrible. One of Morgana's biggest character traits that fans seem to remember is the fact that she wasn't her mother's favorite, and she knew it. But it's unclear exactly how much the two struggled to get along. Not much is explicitly known about the Sea Witch's mother aside from the few statements made by Morgana throughout the Little Mermaid sequel. For instance, she clearly favored Ursula over Morgana, but beyond that, it's all just speculation. That being said, fans were lucky enough to learn that her name was Aquarena from the big man himself, Walt Disney. Interestingly enough, he also claimed that Aquarena almost appeared in a flashback in The Little Mermaid 2. However, the scene needed to be scrapped because it was going to cost too much and add too much time into the movie's length. Now, if that scene was in the movie, Disney fans may have learned more about Aquarena's parenting techniques and how favoritism clearly played a role in their home. But sadly, that wasn't the case, so all there is to go on is what Morgana mentioned in the movie. However, there is the deleted song Gonna Get My Wish. The song is mainly centered around the idea that Morgana was going to steal the trident from Triton and use it to do what Ursula couldn't, take over Atlantica. In the video for the song, which can be found on YouTube, there's a painting shown that depicted a young Ursula and Morgana along with their mother, who was clearly encouraging the elder sibling. The painting even moved as Aquarena patted her favorite daughter on the head and smiled as Ursula held up a trophy for being #1 in magic. And if the sour look on Morgana's face in the painting didn't tell you that her relationship with her mother was rocky at best, then maybe the fact that she was still traumatized by Aquarena's constant criticism will. You see, one scene that stuck out in The Little Mermaid 2 was when Morgana expressed that Aquarena was always criticizing her. According to the young sea witch, her mom even had the audacity to ask her, "Why can't you be more like Ursula?" Now that's terrible parenting. You should never compare your children to each other, especially not to their faces, to make one of them feel bad. It's horrible and truly shows that Morgana was not her mother's favorite and that Aquarena only had eyes for her daughter Ursula. Now, in order to see why Morgana's mother passed her over and chose Ursula to be the favorite child, it's important to understand the differences between the two siblings. On the surface, it sort of looked like Disney designed Morgana to be the equivalent of Ursula 2.0, but after taking a look at the way Morgana behaved and thought, it's clear that she was totally different. While Ursula was a very evil and ambitious villain, Morgana always seemed like she was a villain because of the fact that she had something to prove. Everyone in the Kingdom of Atlantica, and even fans who were watching the movie for the first time, could tell that Ursula was basically pure evil. By that point in time, there wasn't a single good piece of cartilage in her boneless body. But that didn't exactly seem to be the case with Morgana. In The Little Mermaid 2, when Melody was first tricked by Morgana, the young girl was easily manipulated by the stories that Morgana told her. Melody was able to sympathize with the villain because she could tell that Morgana genuinely felt a sense of sorrow. And that vulnerability is something that Ursula never would have shown, for she was much too prideful of a character and needed to be feared. That wasn't the only difference between the two siblings that may have played a part in Aquarena's choice of which sea witch daughter was her favorite. You see, Disney also showed fans that Morgana was much weaker than her sister Ursula, and that she was unable to make potions that were as potent as the ones that the true sea witch made. This was subtly showed when Morgana decided to use the last ounce of one of Ursula's potions to turn Melody into a mermaid. Instead of attempting to brew a potion of her own, she chose to use one that Ursula had left behind, likely because Morgana knew that she couldn't compete with Ursula's level of power in potion making. This is most likely something that Aquarena picked up on between her two children, which could have certainly swayed her to choose Ursula as her favorite while completely overlooking Morgana in the process. And being as overlooked as she was, Morgana ended up developing a very clear case of an inferiority complex, an issue that, if developed early enough in her life, may have played a part in Ursula's being their mother's favorite. This sense of inferiority reared its head multiple times throughout the Little Mermaid sequel. For instance, when Undertow had the guts to compare Morgana to her sister, Morgana nearly ripped his head off. After failing to control magic, Morgana began complaining that she would never be strong enough to take the trident, to which Undertow responded by saying to her, "I bet Ursula could have done it." The sea witch then turns and yells at her henchmen to stop criticizing her before throwing something at him, proving that she hated to be compared to or made to feel like she was less worthy than her sister. And as she grew up, this feeling of being inferior probably got worse as Ursula's notoriety around the kingdom grew. Think about it. It seemed like everyone in Atlantica Atlantica knew who Ursula was and how scary she could be, but no one ever mentioned her having an evil sister, let alone what her name was. This means that they either didn't know Morgana existed or simply weren't afraid of her at all in comparison to Ursula. That means that Morgana not only grew up with her own mother treating Ursula with more respect than her, but with the sea world around them doing so as well. And the fact that Morgana waited until Ursula had failed and died to try to strike against Triton and make Aquareina proud proves that she was too afraid to try and fail while Ursula was alive, inadvertently proving that she was truly inferior. Honestly, Morgana's life seems like it was truly heartbreaking to live through, and the fact that her mother favored her sister over her only makes it worse. Now, after looking at all of that information, there are really only two theories that could be considered to explain why Aquareina overlooked Morgana, the first of which involves the Sea Witch's bloodline. You see, even though it wasn't explicitly mentioned in The Little Mermaid 2, there's a good chance that Ursula and Morgana were only half-sisters and did not share the same father. The main reason why that seems like a fair judgment is that it's unlikely that Triton was Morgana's brother, yet it's been confirmed that he was indeed the brother of Ursula. So in the end, Aquareina may have played favorites and simply based her judgment on her daughter's bloodlines. And even though there's been no indication as to who Morgana's father was, there's very little doubt that he was weaker than Ursula's dad in terms of overall power. That sounds like an old schoolyard argument. Oh yeah, well my dad's stronger than your dad, but that's not the case here, because Morgana's father couldn't have been stronger than a god, which Poseidon actually was. And oh yeah, in case you were unaware, it's been confirmed through other sources connected to The Little Mermaid, such as the Broadway musical, that the Greek god Poseidon was the father of Triton and Ursula. In the musical, there were a couple of added songs, including one named Daddy's Little Angel, which is sung by Ursula, and it described her life as one of Poseidon's daughters. In the song, she even mentioned him by name, saying Papa Poseidon. As for Morgana, there's simply no telling who her father was because Aquareina likely met them after her affair with Poseidon. But it's highly unlikely that he was a god of the sea like Ursula's father, which explains why Ursula was so much more powerful than Morgana. And their mother knew it, so she chose to favor Ursula over her younger sibling, despite that being a terrible way for a parent to raise their children. On the other hand, there is a chance that Morgana was Triton's half-sister, just like Ursula was, which means that the only reason Aquareina didn't favor her was probably due to a lack of ambition. With Ursula being the daughter of Poseidon and one of the rightful heirs to Atlantica, the Sea Witch lived her life with one ambition-driven goal: to gain control of the kingdom that was once promised to her. Morgana would have never had that connection or desire to overthrow Triton and take the throne on her own. Or if she did, it would seem like she was only following in Ursula's footsteps, since her elder sister was the only one with a rightful claim. That would also explain why in The Little Mermaid 2, Morgana seemed to appear out of nowhere. With Ursula gone, she finally would have been able to potentially one-up her sister. If she managed to take the throne and defeat Triton, Morgana would have proved that she was the child that should have been favored rather than Ursula, meaning that her ambitious attitude didn't come until much later in life than Ursula's, which could have caused Aquareina to pay less attention to her when they were younger, and thus their mother was more likely to favor Ursula, whom she believed had the potential to be something great. It's truly a sad tale for Morgana, no matter which way you look at it. Now there's only one last thing to wonder. Why do you think Aquareina favored Ursula over Morgana when the two seemed so similar? Let me know what you think in the comments below.